What's your comfort level when it comes to tofu? This simple ingredient can be intimidating to those who haven't used it before. Will it be squishy? What does it taste like? What's up with all that water? I really believe that once you learn how to handle tofu, you'll fall in love with it just like I did. It's a blank canvas waiting for you to get creative with it. If you're new here, I'm Lindsay Moe and you're in the Living Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to handle tofu and share 3 of my favorite tofu recipes that I think you'll fall in love with. The first is BBQ Tofu. This is so easy to make. It's baked in the oven with barbecue sauce. It's great for any time of year, but I especially love it during the warmer months when you might be missing those meaty backyard barbecues. Second, I'm going to show you how to make vegan ham. This is actually slabs of tofu marinated and baked with a sweet and smoky glaze. I'm sure this will find its way to your holiday table, but it's also great for prepping on the weekends and using a number of different ways during the week. Finally, I'll show you my twist on Pao Tofu. This is a warm and comforting dish that I'm sure you'll come back to again and again. Before we get started, I would love to have you hit subscribe right below here so you never miss another video from me. You can also head down to the description box and sign up for my email list where you will get access to my tofu quick start guide, which will walk you through all the basics of getting started with tofu. All of the recipes we're making today use extra firm tofu. This is my #1 recommendation for most main dish tofu recipes. It holds its shape well, presses well, and it's just a great way to get started and get used to tofu. When you open up your box of tofu, you'll want to pour the water out and press your tofu using either my homemade method or a tofu press. I have linked both of those in the description box below. You can see I am using the easy tofu press here, which I love, but the homemade version is just placing the tofu between a couple slabs of paper towel on a plate and putting something heavy on top. It works just as well. It's very convenient and you don't have to buy a press. You'll want to press your tofu anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour. The more you press it, the more firm it will be. After pressing, you're ready to cut and marinate your tofu. You'll see in each of these recipes how I choose to cut my tofu, but you are welcome to cut it however you'd like. You may just need to adjust your cooking time accordingly. By pressing out all that bland water and replacing it with marinade, we're creating so much more flavor in the tofu. It really does not have much of a taste on its own, so you want to get creative and replace that bland water with something flavorful. Now let's see how to create my super easy barbecue tofu. This recipe is great as a main dish with like mashed potatoes or side salad, but it's also super good on a sandwich. I like to put it on a brioche bun with some cheese, lettuce, and tomato. You could also make that vegan with vegan cheese or just leave it off. It's just great. To get started, we're going to cut the tofu in half and cut each half into 4 little rectangles. You could also tear it up into pieces with your hands. That would give it kind of a different texture. But we're just going to do the easiest marinade. It's just barbecue sauce. Pour it on there. Move it around with your hands, cover it up, and let it rest. I have a recipe on the blog for a spicy barbecue sauce, which is really good. Or I also like using the Organicville brand of barbecue sauce. Both of them taste like Sweet Baby Ray's, which is my ultimate favorite, but have way less sugar than that version. So I definitely recommend you try one of those 2. Once it's done marinating, try to remove most of the excess barbecue sauce and arrange them in a single layer on a parchment lined baking sheet. You want to take off a little bit of the barbecue sauce because it can really easily burn in the oven and it's going to be in there for a while, so we'll add more as it bakes, but just to get started, try to brush a little bit off with your fingers. And you're just going to bake this in a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes. Turn it, brush on some of that reserved marinade, and bake it for another 30 minutes until it's crispy. Again, make sure you keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't burn. I like to add a little extra barbecue sauce on top before I serve it, but this is optional. It's just so good. It really satisfies that barbecue craving, and the baked texture turns out really well. Next up is vegan ham. This is really different from other vegan ham recipes on the internet because it is gluten-free. It's not made with vital wheat gluten. It's just tofu, marinated and glazed. This has a pretty long ingredients list, but if you prepare the marinade at the same time as the glaze, it goes a little bit faster. They use a few of the same ingredients, but to get started, you're going to add beet juice, olive oil, tamari or soy sauce. Tamari is just gluten-free soy sauce, essentially. We have a little bit of ketchup, liquid smoke, maple syrup, Dijon mustard, garlic powder, onion powder, smoked paprika, and salt. And just stir that up. This will be our marinade for our tofu. When it comes time to cut your tofu, I like to cut it into like a wedge to start with. I feel like having a little bit of it thick and a little bit of it thin really gives it the right texture. But as you'll see, it was too hard to cut all of it into wedges. It just gets kind of crazy. So actually the rugged edged pieces were some of my favorites. The edges get so crispy and so delicious when they roast in the oven. So you can do this as rustic as you want. Again, you could break this into pieces with your hands if you want. I liked that the slabs kind of resembled like a slice of ham, but you'll want to arrange these in your marinade. This pan wasn't really big enough for the amount of tofu that I had. You might want to use a slightly bigger pan just so they can all sit in a single layer, but it worked and was fine. And it's so red. I love that it turns out really red like ham. You just want to use your hands to rub this marinade paste all over the tofu. Make sure it gets on everything so you get lots of flavor, and then just let it rest. While it rests, you can put together your glaze. We're going to use pineapple juice, beet juice, maple syrup, Dijon mustard, melted vegan butter, brown sugar, more liquid smoke, and salt and pepper. And just stir that up until it's combined again. Arrange your tofu in a single layer on a parchment lined baking sheet, and we're going to spoon half of the glaze over the tofu before we start baking it. You'll want to bake that in a 375-degree oven for 22 minutes. Pull the tofu out, flip it, and spoon the other half of the glaze over the top and bake it for another 22 minutes or until the edges are crisp and the glaze has been absorbed. You can see that little piece on the right-hand corner on the bottom that was just so crispy and good. That was the first one I ate when it came out, and I love it. I hope you try this one. Next, we're going to do Kung Pao Tofu. This is not a classic or authentic Kung Pao by any means. This is just my take on Kung Pao Tofu. We really don't have great vegetarian Chinese takeout options in my town, so I found myself just playing around and making more and more myself. To get started, we're going to use pressed tofu again, cut it in half, kind of like a book. And then we're just going to cut it into bite-sized pieces. I do this by slicing 4 ways down and then just making little cubes across. To get our tofu kind of crispy, we're mixing cornstarch with tamari as a little marinade. Toss your tofu in that. Try to get it in kind of a single layer. You have to stir it kind of gently so you don't rip off pieces. Then we're going to make our Kung Pao sauce, which starts off with soy sauce or tamari. We have water, cooking sherry, coconut sugar, rice vinegar, cornstarch, hoisin sauce, orange juice, sambal oelek, or you could also use sriracha if you prefer, and a little sesame oil. And just whisk that all together. Now we're ready to cook our tofu. Add a little grapeseed oil to a wok or a nonstick pan. Heat that up and just cook your tofu until it's slightly browned. Pull that out, and then we're going to add onions, red bell pepper, and green bell pepper. I'm also adding garlic and ginger. Toss your tofu back in there, add your Kung Pao sauce, and let it cook until it becomes thick and coated, and it is so good. I serve it over rice with some chopped up peanuts and sliced scallions or green onions. That's it. I hope you're feeling more confident with tofu and feel inspired to try a few new tofu recipes. If you'd like to make the recipes I showed you today, head down to the description box where I have linked the full blog posts. Before you head out, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending this time with me today, and I'll see you next time.